Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Season 1 finale of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. A great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Okay, so this is I think, very beautifully done because the entire time you're thinking this is a multiversal story, which it is a multiversal story. The way someone put it was, at the end of the day, it's kind of like a more extended what if, where it's like, what if ended up being like these one-off episode type of things, obviously one-shot things in the comics, but this is like, no, you're getting a whole series built over like a what if scenario, but also at the heart of it, not only is it a multiversal travel story, it's also a multiversal story, it's also a time travel story, interesting enough, but we'll get to that. So obviously, Peter doing the Spider-Man thing, stopping some carjackings and stuff like that. That was so messed up with that guy where the guy was like, oh, here's that thing of yours. And he's shaking it to hear. He's like, no. Peter's like, no. It's like his diorama for class. And Nico, being the best bro possible, is like, yo, I got you. And shows her thing is covering photosynthesis, and she does it most extreme slowly. So Pete luckily shows him in time. The diorama's not great. Funny enough, Emma, despite not being there, seeming like she's so like always on her phone, like we just don't know Emma at all, apparently nailed it and killed it. So they're like, oh, interesting. I guess it's like they did a lot of the work, and maybe she did her own work too, but she's the one that ended up presenting the project. Hey man, it's cool, it's great, you know. It's like she's the more, I think, public speaker. I mean, the other two probably I got rattled because of just everything all at once and just kind of like, all right, catching your footing, and just Emma's the one that's like, yo, she hit the gas and didn't stop until it was done. So worked out on that front. But yeah, so we also catch up with Norman as he brings everyone into the fold of what he's been up to, the internship, everything that all the interns are working on, including Dr. Connors and Peter, that project, and we find out what it's about. Inspired by Thor, the Shatari attack during the movie Avengers, as well as the situation with Doctor Strange in the beginning of the series, has inspired him to want to try and do space travel. It's like, yeah, it's possible, and the wonders we could see using everything that everyone's been doing up until this point. He's using that research to accomplish this, you know. And Peter, like, the others kind of like, should we really be doing this? Like, you didn't tell us what you were doing. Like, maybe we shouldn't really be doing this, meddling with something we don't fully understand. But it's like, oh, we're going to use a remote place in space and stuff, but it's about instantaneous travel and stuff like that, like the other situations. And it's the situation where, like, yes, did Osborn have terrible intentions? No, but it's that he's a very ambitious person and wanting to kind of push the envelope in evolution so quickly that it's like you're so egotistical, you think you got it in a bag. I mean, if you were smart, you wouldn't just have used everyone's pieces to this whole puzzle. You would have brought everyone into the fold and you could have discussed it together, but like, you made a unilateral decision like, we're going to move forward. Because Whitman's a yes man, and he thinks he's got everything figured out too, so he probably thinks there's no problems. Amadeus is like, oh, I kind of figured out based on everything, and he's down for it because, you know, he's kind of got that same mentality as Osborn, whereas the others kind of don't. And this is when stuff pops off, and then the creature, well, before they could even like open the thing, Doctor Strange pops up, and Peter's like, it's you for the Midtown thing, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, wait, why does he not know? I was like, was that a different Doctor Strange from a different universe? And then it's not until all of it starts piecing together, I was like, oh my god, it's a time travel story. It's a loop. This is how Peter, because I didn't even think about it last episode. I just thought like, oh, they're injecting Peter's blood or DNA sequence or whatever into a spider. Didn't even think in my mind, oh, it's not a spider, it's the spider. I was like, that's awesome. That's so cool. Like, once again, because I heard someone's complaint, because I brought it up in the first episode. I was like, oh yeah, didn't Miles get his powers from a multiversal spider? And it's like, yes. And I was like, oh, and I remember someone's issue was like, oh, like, leave that to be Miles' thing. Don't make it this Peter's thing. And I was like, I understand that person's criticism. Now it's like, no, it wasn't even a multiversal spider. It's a spider, like, it's a looped situation of, like, you know, it's like it's an Ouroboros of Peter becoming Spider-Man eventually led to the spider that ended up biting him in the past. It's just, oh, I love that so much. I was like, that's so dope. But yeah, Norman ignored what Doctor Strange was trying to say and ended up activating the portal and opened up to, I don't know if we're gonna do Null or whatever, but like That's so interesting to see, like, the symbiotes look like that, are looking so bug-like, because I'm so used to them looking like goo without bodies. But then I think about Ultimate, was it Unlimited Spider-Man? Once again, like, it's one of my favorite, like, short-lived Spider-Man series. The show only got one season, 13 episodes. It was kind of like this, what, neo-futuristic, like, it's like in a different planet slash universe. I can't remember. But yeah, like in that symbiotes. Yeah, symbiotes. Like Carnage and Venom just look like hulking beasts, but they don't have humans like hosts. They're just by themselves looking like that. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know, because especially because that creature later on turns into Blob and fuses with others. So I'm like, oh, I guess that's just their default state in this universe. Which I thought was interesting, because like I'm used to them just being blobs without form, but I mean that could also be like maybe they've interacted with species that gave them that form. I don't know. That's what I thought was so fascinating. But yeah, it's in that bug form, and luckily Peter gets time to shift over to Spider-Man, saves the day. Him and Doctor Strange are working together, which is pretty dope, against this whole thing. And Peter's just trying to like, all right, I'm gonna work on the machine. And I love the Strange like rewinds time. He's like, oh, how did you do that? He's like, kid, focus on the machine. And yeah, at least once again, I'm also a fan. I never get tired of it. I love when things utilize. I mean, it's Spider-Man, so of course he's going to do it. Whether it's the train situation from Spider-Man, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, whether it's in the, Peter trying to stop a train in the first PS4 Spider-Man game, because he even makes reference to, oh man, that worked last time, kind of acknowledging like, oh, a similar thing that happened to Toby in Spider-Man 2 happened to him in that universe. But also, and even in Homecoming, when he's stopping like the boat from falling apart, like I'm a big fan of like multiple strands and Peter just like pulling on all the webs at once. I'm always a fan of that. I always just think like it just looks cool and super iconic and stuff. So him doing that later on when he's like every piece of the machine that he's like pulling on the webs from. But yeah, because I also love Doctor Strange, because initially he doesn't understand the whole thing. He's like, what's this all about? I also appreciate, I'm a little over the place, I apologize, but like Norman being like, oh my god, you're the reason why Midtown High, what happened to it, because he's looking this as a situation of like, we've let these heroes run rampant too much. It's kind of up to us. Like they never care about the damage they cause to us. It's we, the people, having to be left behind to clean up the damage, right? Type of situation, and trying to act a little holier than thou in a lot of ways, I think. But it's also like for him, it's like we can kind of rise up to that godhood that these heroes were at. This is kind of our time. Let's get his ego getting the best of him. Yes, there's altruism buried underneath all of that, but like I said, it's buried under that like ego and that ambition. It's kind of, you know, and I guess that's what twists and contorts him into what he becomes as a Green Goblin. But either way, I thought that was fascinating, trying to paint Strange as like the villain. But yeah, like that's what this all was. And it wasn't until Strange shows up at the school, like they played a scene again where he was like, wait, where am I? Wait, where is this? And he pieces it together in that moment. But yeah, they end up sending the symbiote back. Like I said, it melded with all those others. So I thought it was interesting too, because they're all the same shade. They're not differentiated. It's not, because there are different ones. Once again, what's in it? I know there's one I think called Scream. I think there's one called, isn't it Toxin? Obviously, I know Riot from, because I've only ever seen the first Venom movie. I haven't seen the other two. But obviously, I'm familiar with Carnage. But I think the Venom movie made me look into the other symbiotes. And like I said, like Riot, Scream. Like I said, I think one's name is Toxin. So, but I don't know if that's indicative of anything in that moment right there. And like I said, I don't know if this is going to lead to a null situation in this particular series or not. But of course, like the thing is closing in, you're like, of course, a slice of it's going to stay here, isn't it? And of course, like neither one of them notices when a piece of it falls out and falls through. So I was like, of course that was going to happen. So I was like, and kind of very No Way Home-esque, there's a little piece of symbiote. I mean, and at least in that situation, that was a multiversal piece finding its way here. This one, it's like, well, it's in the same universe, it's just from deep space. So I don't know if the J. Jonah's son being an astronaut, bringing it back from space, I think that's the classic story. I don't know if that's all. I think that's how they did it for the third Sam Raimi movie, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not sure. I don't know if that's just like the classic story and maybe they've shifted it over the years, but that's like my memory of like how Venom typically comes into Peter's life, which also makes me feel like we're probably not. I don't know the story of Marvel Spider-Man 2 because I haven't played it, but like the way Marvel Spider-Man 1 plays it, obviously like the Venom story goes a different route. It feels like this could go the same route as that potentially, but it's like, I mean, it still could go down the Eddie Brock route, you know, because we haven't introduced the Daily Bugle and stuff like that, so some of that could play into it, maybe not. Like the series is doing its own thing in a lot of ways, pulling from different things and shifting stuff this way and that way, so it could easily be a situation of they could just go like, it's not Eddie that becomes Venom, very much like in the Spider-Man PS4/PS5 game. So we'll have to wait to see on that front. It would be interesting, and once again, having not played the PS5, you know, Spider-Man 2, like, I have an idea who it is just because of Marvel Spider-Man 1. I'm like, oh, it's got to be that person, right? I'm assuming it is. Everyone kind of theorized it is, and I've never heard a confirmation, but I'm pretty sure it's that person. So I'm like, opens the door for that to happen in this series as well, which would be interesting, and especially with Norman getting his hands on it at the end. That's what kind of plays into like the similarities, even though it would be different situations that led to him using the symbiote. He uses it for very different reasons, or connections to it in the PS4 Spider-Man game. But either way, putting that aside, picking up in the aftermath of all that, Osborn's reputation has taken a hit. You know, it's like he's still okay, but you know, it's like they're trying to make it seem like, oh, it was an accident, but then other people like, he tried to be like, oh, nothing happened, but other people like, no, stuff did happen. So the internship got kind of splintered. Obviously, we see Amadeus Cho is working at Oscorp. I guess he has his own, like, maybe division, or like he's the head of his own division or whatever. Like, this is what he wanted. He was perfectly fine with what Osborn did. The others obviously walked away. Like Asha did, Jean did, and we find out, yes, she's already finessed and she's working with Matt. I'd said at the time, I was like, I knew she was a character that had ties to Daredevil, and I wasn't, well, I think she has ties to Daredevil, but I was like, so I looked it up, and I was like, okay, like her being there, because I thrown out like, okay, like the fact is Matt showed up that very night, even though she got an accident. I was like, there has to be something to that. And then you add to it, like, I was like, either that or she has to be there for Octavius, and it never ended up being revealed she was there for Octavius, so she had to be there for Matt. So it's interesting knowing in this continuity he's already kind of got it like a sidekick. Him and Finesse are working together. In fact, Matt is kind of sending her back undercover again with the whole situation that Harry has set up with Webb. We'll get to that in a second. So that's really interesting. It is a thing of, yeah, you got to be, you want to believe in people and give them a chance, but you also want to be realistic and just like, all right, let's see, you know, your dad kind of tried to make it seem like he had the best of intentions. Let's see if you really have the best of intentions, Harry. And that's the thing. You could always lose sight and things could kind of go sideways because, like I said, after everything that went down, Peter has to decide what he's going to do going forward. Because he's like, yes, I respect Mr. Osborn. He got me to where I am. He helped kind of make me who I am today. But also thinking about what Harry said to him in episode 8 too, where like he has to make his own choice, where it's like, I don't think I could ever fully trust Mr. Osborn again because he lied to us, secrets and lies. Like, you know, so because of that, it's like, well, what do we do going forward from here? And Harry ends up starting a company, Webb, to kind of allow all the interns as well as anyone else that wants to be a part of this to kind of do their own thing and not have to be hamstrung and not be lied to. Like everything's kind of very upfront. I'm curious to see what that means for Dr. Connor. Whitman's going to stay where he's going to stay, I'm sure. I'm sure Connors will as well, or maybe she goes off on her own and that eventually leads to the whole situation of her potentially become the Lizard in this continuity, like typical. Because I don't know if Connors is always associated with Norman. I think Connors kind of, I can't even remember what the Spectacular Spider-Man situation, whether Connor was working at Oscorp at the time. Might have been, I believe. Not unless it was like just Connors just doing their own. I can't remember. So we'll see. I could definitely see her not want to work for Norman anymore after everything. Once again, Whitman, and he believes in Oscorp. He's down for it and stuff. Like he'll probably look at it like, like the man did what he did, and it's not that big of a deal. I could see Dr. Connors. I could see her massively having an issue with it. So we'll see on that front. But she probably won't join the web program because it seems to be for the younger people, which we saw the list of people. I Googled a few names off that list. Some of the names were like characters from the comics. Others were, I think, just artists, comic artists. I don't know if they necessarily had anything to do with Marvel. Maybe they did, maybe they don't. And like one person I googled, I don't remember who it was. Like it's like was an artist who did stuff for like ID Publishing. So that's why I'm like IDW Publishing. Sorry. So I don't know if this person like ever did anything for Marvel. Maybe they did. So that's why I'm wondering, like, maybe those are writers and comic people or something like that mixed in with characters. And I was looking up something and some reference Webb and Ned. I was like, what? And I looked back at the scene. I was like, oh, Ned's right there. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I was like, oh, so this might be a continuity where Ned becomes the Hobgoblin, because that character typically is the Hobgoblin in comics. Now, whether Jacob Batalon gets to become the Hobgoblin in whatever future the Spider-Man movies have in the MCU, that's who knows. I think that'd be pretty cool if he got to play the Hobgoblin, but who knows if they're going to take that direction with. I think storytelling wise, it'd be, once again, I'm always a fan of the person you trust. Like I said, like you take a Spectacular Spider-Man or the Ultimate Spider-Man video game where Eddie and Peter are friends. It's not like we're strangers and we have like Eddie has beef with Spider-Man. It's not those the dynamics are shifted a little bit in those adaptations. So that's why I'd be so like, oh man, like the betrayal of like, not only like this is like one of your best friends. Well, it is your best friend, and for them to become like a villain, you have to stop. That's what I think is so interesting. But one other person that kind of got the notice too was Lonnie. But we see like his skin is starting to turn blue, so it is an eroding process of like, right. So I'm like, how are you going to keep covering that up from your parents? But he's still running with the 1/10, as I figured he would be. But I was thinking maybe we'll get a Donovan scene. We didn't, because I guess it was all he probably already knew, like, yeah, I can't come back. Doesn't mean he won't pop up in the future, but this is Lonnie's route to. Full villain is going to be unclear, but he's going to definitely balance in that like gray area of like, I'm going to do some good stuff, but I'm also going to do some bad stuff because I'm going to do what's best for my community and try to, but good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, so it could be a thing of you start off with the best of intentions and you lose yourself along the way, like an Osborn did. So, and will continue to. So I'm curious to see how things play out on that front with Lonnie, because he's like, yeah, because he threw away the jacket, so he's kind of the Lonnie we knew is slowly disappearing. But it's like, yeah, there's still good in him, and that's probably a piece and part of him that Peter will try and reach out to more and more. But especially if Lonnie's taking an interest in a web program, especially if he knows like Peter's going to be associated with it. And I'm curious to see where things kind of go on that front. I'm also curious to see where things go, speaking of Peter, where him and Pearl come into play, because like I said, in at least in the comics, she is a powered individual. I'm wondering whether that'll come about or not. But also it's like, is she going to be like the main love interest for this? I was like, oh, maybe it's her and Nico thing. Could still be. But Peter was like, whoa, wait, did you just call me Peter? Because she usually calls him Petey. So it's like, yeah, she's seeing you in a different light, not just looking at you as like the kid she used to babysit back in the day. So yeah, we'll see what things kind of go on that front. We had a Octavia situation, him in his cell. So it's like, right, preparing himself to become Doc Ock. We also touched on Nico's situation where she is taking the locket or whatever around her neck, and she's talking to her mom. She's like, it's good to see you again. So I wonder, it's like her mom's like, because she kind of does an incantation. So I don't know if she's like speaking to her mom from beyond, like maybe some fragment of her soul exists in that amulet or whatever, and she's speaking to her, like being able to kind of tap into the other side. Like, we don't know the full situation there, but once again, touching on Nico's more magical side of things. Maybe it's stuff that she discovered about herself like after her mom died. So it also kind of seems like her mom is gone. She like, I don't know if they're going to touch on the dad situation or not. Like, who knows what that situation is in this continuity. Which, speaking of dads, we had Peter's situation was like, ooh, that's interesting. May is visiting Peter's dad in prison, because I believe someone can correct. May's Peter's dad's sister, right? Because his parents never really get touched on. Like, I think once again, the one I know is like the Andrew Garfield movies were touching on his parents and some secrets that they had. And like I said, the Ultimate Spider-Man game had like some ties between Eddie's parents and Peter's parents. But it's kind of like the Bruce Wayne stuff where like his parents don't really get covered too much, or most adaptations don't touch on that, except like more recent stuff has kind of delved deeper and deeper into like the Waynes not being great, specifically Thomas and Martha. Like there's some shady stuff, specifically on the Thomas front. I know like Gotham touched on that. I think the Telltale Batman game is like the first storyline I ever came across that kind of hinted to the Waynes not being the greatest, specifically Thomas. But obviously, even the most recent adaptation being The Batman, because they touched on like Thomas not being the greatest, even making Martha and Arkham. So yeah, it's interesting. Like, okay, we're going to explore it. I mean, once again, I'm not the comic aficionado. I have like slightly above average comic book knowledge, but I've never really heard anyone talk about stories revolving around Peter's parents, because I guess it's something that's never really tackled. But the fact, because I thought it was interesting when Peter and Harry and Nico, the whole conversation about, dead moms. I was like, oh, it's interesting Peter doesn't bring up his dad. Oh, his dad, because his dad's not dead. His dad's in prison. I was like, that's interesting. I wonder why. I'd assume Pete knows why he does not talk, and that'd be why he doesn't talk about his dad. So I'm like, what was he up to? What part will he play in all of this, And why did May come visit him now? I wonder we're going to find out something where it's like, I wonder if like she's kind of concerned because of the stuff Peter's kind of getting mixed up in. The Midtown thing happened. Now the whole thing in Oscorp. So I'm wondering like, or not unless she's finding out about the, obviously May found out about Peter's situation at the end of Homecoming. Who knows if she secretly knows, and he doesn't know that she knows. I mean, there have been versions where May has known and she hasn't said anything because she just lets Peter keep going on thinking that she doesn't know. So could be one of those situations we'll have to wait to see. But also I love the conversation Peter had with Strange, because it's, Strange is kind of upset with the whole thing because he's like, once again, like, even though this is a different universe, it's still the thing of my interference in the past. Who knows what that did? It changed the course of so many lives, and that's where we catch up with all these other things, especially when Peter's like, wait, you've been to the past, or you've been to the future, so you know what it holds, right? Like, so let me know what's ahead so I can prepare. And it's like, yeah, but knowing the future is never a good thing. That, because you never know the domino effects you could have. Like, knowing the future, you're trying to prevent one thing and you set other things in motion. Like, you just, time ebb and flows like that. You don't know how I said, the dominoes will fall, the ripple effect essentially. But it's also like, yeah, like, because Strange is thinking about the implications of like so many people's lives were thrown off course. Like, I will never know, because Peter's like, yeah, people's lives were saved present day and in the past. Like, no one got hurt. He's like, yeah, but you don't know that. He's like, how many people's lives were completely taken off course because of that one set of events? And it's like, you just don't know. Like, even this series being a long-running domino effect. I mean, it kind of makes me think of like the Flash TV show. That's kind of like an alternate timeline of like, yeah, Barry typically gets his powers like 10 years from when he gets them in the TV show, but he got them like 10 years earlier because Reverse Flash came back in time and essentially got him his powers earlier because of his own machinations, yada, 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 so on and so forth. We don't have to get into the whole thing, but I do think that's really fascinating to think about, where it's like, no, like you don't know like the ramifications of like that, the timey-wiminess of it all. But Peter looks at it, it's like kind of like maybe things are meant to happen for a reason, because he's like, if it wasn't for that situation, I wouldn't be who I am right now. It helped make me who I am right now, that situation. I wouldn't be Spider-Man, and I wouldn't be able to help many people the way I am able now. So like there is good that comes from it. And it's almost like a thing of things were meant to be, so maybe they happen for a reason, So, I mean, obviously this is also 2016, so Strange isn't out there to the world, because that's what's like, oh, maybe it's a Strange from a different universe. It's like, no, it is the Strange of this universe. He's just like, he's not well known. He's still just doing his thing, especially because he's dealing with the cosmic stuff. I mean, the only reason why Strange kind of gets known to the greater world and probably the Avengers is because he kind of had to stop. I mean, he had to come to the Avengers when the whole like Infinity War thing was happening. So like both world, like universe, like everything collided of the cosmic side of things with Strange and all that versus like, the more, even though it's science fictional, the more grounded like elements to the MCU and stuff like that. So he's a known commodity in this regard. It's actually interesting to see that this is like the first here, which is interesting when you tie it into like the MCU of like Strange and Peter with the whole No Way Home situation, and obviously their interactions in Infinity War and stuff like that, but also like the fact that you have Strange being like the first person that Peter interacts with is just really interesting amongst like the superheroes that Peter interacts with, which is interesting. So considering the first person he interacts with in the greater Marvel universe ended up being Strange regardless, but also now it's like it ended up being a villain like Norman. So the first superhero he interacts with is Strange, and so for it all to come full circle at the end like that, I thought was beautiful. And especially Strange being like, even if I could tell you, which I can't, I wouldn't tell you, but I also know looking at you, you're prepared for what's coming. And he leaves, and then you look to the left and you see Uatu in the sky, which I'm like, ooh, playing into the whole like, yeah, it is a what if story in a lot of ways. This is a what if story in a greater. I don't know if that's supposed to indicate like, oh, is this taking place after the events of What If? I mean, that's always in perpetual motion, Uatu watching things. So, but where are we in Uatu's story, and is that all going to connect animation wise across the different animated projects like Eyes of Wakanda? I probably won't touch on that stuff, but it could always be sprinkled in there, just kind of being that connective tissue between What If, Eyes of Wakanda, this, and then what was it? Oh, Marvel Zombie. So they're all like Marvel multiversal stories in the multiverse that is the MCU sacred timeline type of situation. So just interesting stuff on all fronts. So, but Peter's saying like, right, no matter like, right, here I come, like, no matter what comes, I'll face it out, I'll figure it out because I'm Spider-Man. So thought that was just kind of like just beautifully done all around, a great cap off to the season. Very, very excited to see what the future holds. The show was renewed for a second and third season, so I don't know where they are in production-wise with the second season. They might try and do maybe season 2 and 3 like back-to-back, maybe, or maybe there will be a break in between. Like I said, it just depends on how much I see. Because I don't know if season 3 was greenlit recent. Because I remember hearing about a season 3 a little while back, but I don't. Once again, I don't know where the production schedule is on things. Because initially they were going to make it so that when the show was originally like Spider-Man freshman year, each season was going to be like, a year of high school. So next season 2 would have been sophomore year. But now they've changed it where it's like, no, like just because of that's the old framing device, it's not necessarily going to be applicable to this show because like it's not going to be 1 year of school per season anymore. So we'll see whether they kind of skip around time wise and stuff like that, or keep it pretty succinct of like, oh, maybe this all happens roughly maybe half of season could be like the remainder of his sophomore year, a freshman year, the beginning of his sophomore year. They'll go with the time frames that they want to. So it'll be really interesting to see how they all where they take this next and where it all goes. Like I said, the ending, just all these massive threads that you get to see kind of come back through, especially with Harry starting Web and what that becomes and everything. So we'll see what the future holds, what new characters we see, what characters will return and under what developments. Like I said, we get Tombstone going through his transformation, Lonnie going through his transformations as Tombstone, Octavius getting ready to become Doc Ock, and then like the whole symbiote situation with Norman. So there's a lot of threads that can be pulled on. So I'm very, very excited to see where the second season ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.